Welcome to the Fulfillment Game. Here we have meaningful conversations with extraordinary professionals, exploring life and their personal wisdom in a context grounded in contribution. I'm your host, Amit Sood. Today we have Joe Gilgoff. Joe is a renowned expert in customer experience. Joe has worked with world class businesses, helping them transform customer experience into an engine driving loyalty, revenue growth, and competitive differentiation. But you will note that CX for Joe is not an expertise gained from bookish knowledge. It's a passion, a calling. Joe is passionate about introducing humanness in day to day business transactions. That's what makes this conversation really special. So stay tuned. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you very much. It's such a privilege and pleasure to be here with you today.
It's a pleasure to have you. Uh, Joe, tell us about what made you an expert in customer experience. What brought you to this place? Tell us your story.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, you know, I think probably true to today's conversation and having gotten to know you a little bit before today, I'll do the more typical sort of LinkedIn bio pretty quickly, and then maybe we could get to even more interesting things. But I've been very, very blessed to have a 20 plus year career in the space that I now affectionately call CX or customer experience. When I started out my career, we didn't know to call it that. Eventually, as folks in customer service slash support slash customer care, seem to have gotten together and try to find a cooler, hipper sounding name like CX. But started out my career 20 plus years ago, let's say in customer service and on the front lines. I don't know if I've mentioned to you, but I probably took around maybe 70,000 phone calls. They were tracked in my first job, speaking to customers and helping them out with various issues. And this was at a business that was in the local leisure space. It was a blast. I could go on and on, but it was a blast, and it was my entryway into this industry. So I actually spoke to so many people over the phone and just started to help out with whatever issues they had calling in for this particular business. I loved it, and I decided to invest heavily in my career in two areas. One being customer care slash this overarching customer experience. I found in my career it was helpful that that morphed into what people think of as customer loyalty and customer retention strategy, which for me was simple and organic enough because it just went back to providing great service and helping people at the right key moments. And the second area that I've always invested in is people, team building, management, mentorship, leadership, all of it. I just love it. If I had a second job or second department, it would definitely be the people HR function. Those are just my passion areas. So I eventually, after starting out on the front lines, in a sort of corner of a one floor in downtown New York, a classic startup,
Tell
startup
us
kind of
about
job,
that.
and start on the front lines.
Tell us a little bit more about that. I remember,
Sure.
hearing from you that you chose to stay in
Yes.
line, that the taking the call kind of work
Yes.
for a very
Yes.
period,
Yes.
particularly, yeah. Tell us a
Yes,
little.
100%. I'd love to. See, this is my preferred conversation. Eventually I headed up customer experience at some great consumer facing brands like AG1 and Daily Harvest and
Mm.
SeatGeek and Sundays for Dogs and First Dibs, and it's been a blast. And now, as you know, I'm doing my own advising thing and just continuing to help in these areas as much as possible. But maybe in our first conversation, I mentioned to you. When I first got started with customer service, I'll take it back for a moment. Even more in my life, I come from a family of seven, four older siblings, and two really awesome parents growing up. And one by one, as each one would choose their career path, I felt they were doing such amazing things. Eventually, I mean, my parents were things like consumer affairs journalist and writer and midwife and doula, my mom's side. And my siblings started to do things like being a pediatrician, starting nonprofits, teaching, working with immigrant youth. I mean, this is just a sampling.
Wow.
So here I'm coming up, and I found myself very attracted to business and entrepreneurship. Again, at that time, I probably didn't even know the word entrepreneurship, but I can now identify I loved being around, creators and kind of the grit and the hustle and the scrappiness. To be honest, when I took that first call center job, which titled itself as an internship, which meant take 130 calls and do whatever else is asked of you, probably for $10 an hour and no benefits. And I was thrilled because it was a job in business in Manhattan. And, honestly, when I took that job, I was probably thinking that it was just a foot in the door and that I'd get out of this customer service thing soon enough. It turned out I absolutely loved it. And I loved bringing rigor and process and like some art and some science to each call, experimenting as to what would produce the best outcome. The startup where I worked, we did track some metrics, and I found that fun and exhilarating. So we would track the percentage of calls that we took where we booked customers, as it were, for a local activity, like a food tour in Greenwich Village, New York, or whale watching in Monterey, California. And I loved it. I knew that I'd set them up with a great activity if I could book the tour and it helped everybody out. So there was that business aspect that did always appeal to me. But what appealed to me even more was I was shocked to find how much I could impact a person's day, especially given, the subject matter. I mean, later in my career, to at least get into things that, people are putting in their bodies, maybe making them healthier, longevity, stuff like this. At that point, I mean, I remember a call. I was doing something as simple as trying to help a gentleman figure out what in the world had happened to this gift certificate for a walking chocolate tour, which is a thing that exists in New York. And he called in and he had purchased it for his wife, couldn't find it. And what was even more remarkable is I couldn't help the gentleman at all.
Oh,
He hadn't purchased it through our service, and
oh,
I was of no use to him. But I suppose the way that I spoke to him and the care that I showed, I helped out as best as I could. In this case, it was probably just getting him to the right phone number. But we had a great conversation along the way. I delighted in kind of these, moments of human connection along the way, and just letting him know that I really cared and that I would do the very best I could to help him out, and that I delighted in this experience he'd have with his wife. So something about the conversation touched him, and he told me that I had restored his faith in humanity. And I remember my initial response, was sort of a nervous laughter and maybe assuming he was joking. And he actually took the time to clarify that he wasn't joking at all, that he had just been through some things recently and just getting a caring human voice on the other end of the phone when he had such low expectations calling in and, just chatting for a few minutes had restored his faith in people. So I was hooked after that. That was the moment for me. I'm like, I don't think I'll be leaving this industry soon. It was wonderfully fulfilling, almost addictive.
wow. I remember the context of Zappos that shows up sometimes.
Yes.
People, the pizza ordering experience. I mean, am I right? Do I have my reference right? Where somebody made a phone call to Zappos to find out where one could order pizza. And yet the call center person who took the call took the pains to help them find, although that's not their business at all, the stores
It's
which.
it it's amazing. I'm certain that you're right. It rings a bell. And the broader sort of Zappos story that I've told in my career many times, and I've made Delivering Happiness. It's probably one of the books in back of me. I made it required meeting on certain teams that I've led. The general story with Zappos of going from a shoe, an online company that sold shoes and was of middling success. And apparently, the founder, I think Tony Hsieh, had, put in his last dollar into the business and it could have made it or not as a shoe selling company. But at some point, someone decided, I guess, Tony was really the visionary behind this. Instead of thinking of themselves as a shoe company, they'd think of themselves as the best customer service company on the planet.
Mm.
And pretty much tracks to making that declaration, and you see like sort of the revenue chart shoot up. So I'm so glad you brought it up, and yes, that dynamic of you would be allowed to take one call for the entire shift if it was the anecdote you're referencing, or there might be others out there. You could take one call for the whole shift, and to your point, I mean, it could be a wrong number. And I think that famously they were aware that some segment of customers were calling in once a week, once a month, just for human companionship and just to speak to these amazing people in the call center. And they delighted in it. They thought it was sort of a part of the cost of doing business the way they wanted to, and they delighted in it. And look at us here all these years later singing their praises. So yeah, it's a perfect anecdote to bring up with me because it speaks to this intersection I've tried to explore my whole career of, these simple ideas, like treating people with humanity and like they were a friend or family member and uplifting other people's spirits and days and finding that that could extend from the customer to the teams that I was leading. And once I realized, at some point along the journey, wait a second, this actually is great for business too. And probably over the course of my career of the last 20 plus years, I think generally speaking, there's been a greater understanding and acceptance of the power of customer service and holistic customer experience. Again, even from a dollars and cents in business standpoint. So this really speaks to this enormous sense of gratitude that I just walk around with every day. And I hope people feel emanating from me. Part of it is really just this incredible blessing of having found a career and at the right moment in time where, I can make a good living and support my family and travel and do these enriching things. Really, it all started with just, picking up the phone and, and being kind to somebody and trying to help them out. And that's sort of all I've done along the way.
It's amazing to and so refreshing in present times to hear of this also, Joe.
Mm,
It deeply resonates with the heart, but I'm also intrigued about how challenging is it in the in a setting, particularly, in times when I've just come out of a meeting in which a senior executive was setting a context around coaching for their leadership
hmm
team, and the words that they were using was ruthless at least two or three times,
hmm
um, urgency, impact, and rather than work, impact,
Yes.
generate, and no lags, and you know,
Mm,
no leeway, that kind of thing. Less and
hmm
spacious,
hmm
more trust,
Yes.
more push. Uh, you know, so how easy is it for how relevant, is it, and how easy is it for executives to appreciate that this is also a possibility that could generate breakthrough,
Mm,
from
yes.
business.
It's a great question. And I think, it pops to mind for me. I feel like another theme of my career and life are these incredibly obvious epiphanies, which, with all sincerity, some people might have realized, way quicker than me. But then, in fairness, some people realize slower or not, not at all. And I'm just grateful whenever it hits me. So one of my obvious epiphanies along my journey is it's really just all about the people that you're going through that chapter with and those challenges with. It's about the people, the culture, the sense of alignment. I think we talked in our first call ever, about just this idea of being on the same wavelength as another human being. So maybe what I'll do is I'll allude to two career experiences. I'll name the company in the positive sense and leave the other one unnamed. But there's one of my heroes in my career is the founder of Daily Harvest, a woman named Rachel Drury. And she's a friend and support to this day. And I mention her because I remember when I went in for my interview to be a VP at Daily Harvest, and the company was just flying at that time. And, I was there for 4 years, great ride. And when I joined, I was a few minutes into the interview and suddenly felt that, you know, I was being sold to. And it was a first class, it was an amazing experience. At that time, my resume or my LinkedIn was fine. It was okay. Certainly not deserving of this sort of treatment. But I learned that Rachel was somebody who went off gut and heart and making a connection with somebody. And we were 5 or 10 minutes in, and she decided, I want this person to be on the journey with me with my business. And so she was selling me on just the absolute power of customer service and experience and human treatment. Probably helped out that while she came from a really impressive academic and corporate background, along that journey, she worked at the luxury hotel chain Four Seasons. Oh, not everyone can afford to stay at this Four Seasons, but I'll give them a lot of credit that apparently along the way, whether you're a hotshot marketing, young exec like she was or whomever, you start out with training at the front desk and you're helping people out with their luggage and greeting them and giving them that experience. So her challenge to me was, can we create a Four Seasons like experience for every single customer that we have? And so it was a really fun, healthy challenge of almost helping to make sure that we did have enough rigor and sensibility in scaling the operation because the direction coming from the top would be, if a customer called in and they couldn't blend their smoothies the right way, she'd say, buy them a blender, buy them the best blender and send it to them. She wanted to surprise and delight everybody. And along the way, if anyone listening or wants to look it up, the several years that I was at Daily Harvest, we actually encountered some real business challenges that were challenging, even dramatic for some team members. We faced issues. We went through the pandemic together. We faced a food recall issue that was very scary and impacted customers' health and baffled us at the time. We went through real harsh, PR critiques. My team was really up against it because they were on the front lines. So we all went through tough experiences, and all these years later, I'll be asked by somebody, how difficult was that chapter of career or life? And honestly, it was a joy. It was difficult from the sense of I still deeply empathize with customers who faced a health issue, again, completely unbeknownst to us at the time. And so I'm deeply empathetic to that. But as for my experience, honestly, it was exhilarating. And it was because I was leading a team that was incredibly close. We all had each other's back. We all looked out for each other. We truly cared for each other. We cared for the founder. We cared for every last customer. Even if a customer thought we didn't care about them, we went to sleep at night thinking about their well-being. And we're all sort of best friends and almost family all these years later, the things people from that community do for each other. And experience, later in career where we didn't go through anything seemingly as harrowing as that, but every day showing up to work was very hard. And the language in that other company was along the lines of getting through the day together, just kind of head down, kicking the dirt, just getting through the day together. It's paid way more at the latter job than the former job, and would take the former job, and all of our travails just every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So, getting back to your question eventually, sorry, I got a little off track there,
No,
but
no, very.
sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's incredibly hard. And I think it's just finding the right leader, the right executive, the right culture, and having that true deep fit. And the last point I want to make really quickly is I'm not even critical of, you could look at customer support as a cost center, as something you don't want to invest in. There's also nothing wrong with strategizing for AI. It's something that I advise clients on and take great joy in. The point is, there's almost limitless ways of approaching customer experience in a business, just like anything in career life. And it's really just a matter of the right people getting matched up, who have are kind of marching to the same beat and have the same end goals and outcomes they're trying to achieve. And if there's dissonance there, it's going to be really painful. If there's a sense of alignment and deep, you know, what's the word? Symbiosis. Do I have that right? Then everything it'll be a joy.
Mm-hmm. And and what you said, what you spoke about, referred to, appears to be so relevant to customer experience as an idea. To Tony Hsieh, if I remember correctly, was also equally passionate about culture, organizational culture,
Yes.
as he was about customer experience. And it looks like the two topics are not too far from each other.
No.
How we are with each other is how we are going to be with customers. Is that the truth?
100%. And oh, I think a compliment I could pay you, I'm sure it's not unique to me, is questions you ask me immediately call to mind, moments from my life or career, like very crisply, oftentimes exhilarating or magical ones. So you just reminded me of the enthusiasm I had. I got to a place in my career, and I like to joke about myself that I'm not a very creative person. It's really not a joke. Not that creative in a lot of ways, but that also means that when something hits you as a less creative person, it's like a lightning bolt. But I
Yeah.
had this idea one time. I sat down at the computer and I wrote up a job description around a chief care officer. And I wrote it for myself slash the world, just to kind of get this idea on paper. And it's exactly what you just asked about. it just hit me that there's a people HR function. They're usually tasked with creating the culture of the business, let's say along with the C-suite. And then you have this customer service or care team that traditionally might be at the, bottom of the pecking order. I've learned that HR people sometimes feels the same way, and neither should. Both are critically important. So the two functions put together are basically taking care of all the humans involved in the business, the team and the customers. And for most businesses, those two cohorts need to be happy, well taken care of, uh, feel valued, feel loyalty, and so forth. Otherwise, the business will fail. And yet, again, in some businesses, these could be two of the bottom of the rung teams as far as influence and prestige and so forth. So I learned across my career there's a deep camaraderie and bonds, and I learned, not to sound pessimistic, about businesses. It was just finding the right fit. So there were businesses out there that actually elevated both these functions, and I found myself always gravitating. I was always, probably being a little bit nosy or overly involved, the people HR function. So my thought was, why not have one person, the right person, overseeing both of these functions? People HR on one hand, customer care on the other hand. Customer care is what I knew and came the most naturally to me. People HR would have to be learned. Again, in this bolt of inspiration, I probably within a week or two, this is back to Daily Harvest years and Rachel. I asked for permission for the business to fund me to do some training in people and HR. She said yes because she rocked and Daily Harvest rocked. I went and got an e-certificate in some executive people HR training from Cornell University's e-certificate program, and it was phenomenal. And the interesting thing is that my career path just then kept going bobbing and weaving. Never had the chief care officer role. I've since then heard and seen several examples of people who lead both functions, not because of my job description, but because there were like-minded people and organizations in the world. And also, I feel a lot of fulfillment in this current career chapter, um, which I've only alluded to, but now as what I like to think of as a solopreneur, and both as advisor, consultant, but trying to figure out some sense of community brand, something a little bigger that I'm trying to build. And in my own way, I impact both of those functions in businesses. So they come to me for customer experience advising, and a month later, I might have helped to place some amazing talent at their business. Or we might have talked about organization and culture building. In our third conversation, the first two were about some vendor search that they were on. The third was about building their organization and so on. It goes very organically, and I love it. I love the overlap.
Yeah, it appears like a very soulful
Mm,
environment. It looks like a team which is working on a topic such as this, particularly, connecting with the human side of the customer,
hmm.
would be connecting with themselves too in the same fashion.
Yes.
Even on an individual level, you honor
Mm,
the human on this side of the telephone line as one is connecting to the human on the other side of the telephone line. Yeah.
yes. Yes. I think that generally speaking, so this is a common conversation in the CX or support space.
Mm,
For anyone listening who's not in the space, which would probably be most people, uh, we have quite a community and a culture in our industry. We have,
mm,
conferences and events just like every industry and every department does. But what I found, I was just chatting with somebody a couple of weeks ago at one of these conferences, and they had come to the industry from another one. I'm
mm,
basically a lifer, so I'm going secondhand on other industries and teams. Though as I got more into retention and sales and loyalty, uh, I certainly got a sense of those cultures, and they're fine. But there's something about customer experience and service where people it's a community of people who are deeply empathetic. I think would be the main point that I have to make. It also happens to be a group that's incredibly diverse.
mm,
So, and again, I have cause to joke about my lack of relative creativity just because the folks I've managed across my career tend to be wildly creative. At SeatGeek, we had a team. I learned that a predecessor of mine had actually tried to instill a hiring philosophy of hiring all stand-up comedians. And so this actually everything made a lot more sense after I learned that at a team full of artists and comedians and so forth. So deeply empathetic, creative, and diverse people who really go about helping each other like it's their job. That's the way that I've approached my whole career. Every day, especially as I was blessed with so much privilege and luck, and as I rose the ranks, so to speak, in my career, a lot of my day, or mental focus would turn into how do I create this sense of luck and blessing and privilege, and a sense of agency and independence and just fulfillment, like this podcast, and happiness in other people. So I'm very proud of having taken that approach. I think the surprising thing for people outside of my industry is that it's more common than not in my space. So when we get together in Slack communities or in-person conferences or we have our Zoom catch-ups, it's a battle of whether, the focus will be on helping the other person on the call, or yourself, and each wants to help the other. So it's beautiful. And I think, so much as this is the fulfillment game and podcast, I'll just lay it all out there to say that, you know, it's 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 difficult to figure out, what that ultimate life fulfillment will be, or what impact one could have, that I could have, that feels enough or feels satisfying. And I'm not close to having figured that out. The closest I've come is figuring out that if you could spread that joy, and again, that sense of fulfillment and agency, to others, that's a teeny tiny dent that feels very fulfilling. And as somebody who also feels like I've just benefited from an insane amount of luck and privilege in every way. I'm a white man. I'm an average looking white man who was raised by loving parents in a middle class home and taught to, articulate myself reasonably well. And that's my only life experience. And so going through that life experience comes with a tremendous amount of privilege and luck, I think, in ways that are honestly probably too plentiful to even understand and capture. So I've always felt like the very tiniest thing I could do is try to give something back or help others who maybe don't have all the same luck and privilege, to find some sense of the same success and again, agency and independence,
Mm,
which is something, freedom, which is something that, I'm passionate about for myself and others.
yeah, and it appears to resonate with this industry completely, particularly the
Mm,
next universe, where the more one is willing to be the kind of space in which a client or a customer is heard, appreciated,
yes.
and connected at a level which is not just the business quote unquote universe,
Hmm.
willing to be human and touch at a level which is deeper. And to that extent, one has an opportunity to be self-expressed and
Hmm.
to be at ease with oneself, one's own humanity,
Hmm.
one's own emotions. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, 100%. And how's this for luck or deep resonance with industry is, listening to you, I was thinking about what drives great customer service and experience, and really so much of it starts with empathy
Mm,
and true, deep, sincere listening. So
mm,
how great is it to end up in an industry where, most good trainings for customer service start out with, customer will call in, they probably have an issue, they're probably not calling to say great job. And the first thing that we should do is truly deeply listen
mm,
and let the customer speak. I mean, almost let them get it all out,
mm,
sort of exhaust, their frustration and their energy, not in an insincere or condescending way, because,
mhm,
but because, like, they're a human being who's faced, anything ranging from a minor inconvenience to a truly upsetting and impactful experience. And again, even at the brands I've worked at, I've experienced all of it, whether it's a chocolate tour or hearing from somebody in, a hospital bed, and everywhere in between. And whatever it is, they've had an experience. It probably involves their time, their hard-earned money,
Mm.
maybe their health, maybe a sense of their safety, their family or friends' well-being. Something's happened to have them call in and just deeply honoring and listening and understanding the issue first before you speak. It's
Mm.
really, if I were to go in and advise 100 companies on their customer service, we'd probably have to get into lots of acronyms and KPIs and metrics, and I'd have to try to make myself sound smart in certain rooms. Really, a lot of it would get back to really basic concepts, um, like really, really your team dedicating itself to truly listening, empathizing, and understanding the customer's issue and where they're coming from. And
And,
great service and solutions will follow from there.
and Joe, when one thinks about doing this for each other generally on a day-to-day
Mm,
basis, whether on work or otherwise, uh, what do you feel comes in the way? I mean, why is it that
mm.
sometimes as human beings
So
are not,
much,
what comes in the way?
so much, so much. I mean, I guess my mind goes in two directions. I think probably what's served as a challenge, I imagine, for the for the totality of humankind is that it really takes a lot of energy, and I think for some people more than others, but a lot of energy to really dedicate yourself to the other person's perspective and life experience. My dad, who passed a long time ago, and miss him so much, but both of my parents, taught me about this concept of keeping in mind that the other person. I think my dad put it as they have their issues, and we'd kind of poke fun at him, the way that he'd deliver was so cute, but it was basically just always keeping in mind like, oh, they probably got some issues. There's probably something going on in their life and their minds, and but I think it's difficult to really, really dedicate yourself to picturing another person's life experience and mindset and, putting yourself in their shoes, so to speak. To really dedicate yourself to doing that, I think takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of desire to do so. You really have to block out so much judgment. Um, it's much easier. I just think it's a heck of a lot easier to think about things from your own perspective and sort of take the easy way out. There's also this concept of listening only to the extent that you plan out what you're going to say next, and then you stop listening and just wait till you could jump in. That's easier too. And then the second bucket of the infinite challenges in truly empathizing and listening, I think is harder than ever nowadays because of the insane amount of potential distractions that are at our fingertips and all around us. And I struggle with this too. I think I think the first step to improvement is to accept that you struggle with it too. So, uh, whether it's someone from my professional world or my wife or my mom or whomever, to really, really deeply listen. And I think for a lot of us, we start to feel whatever your dominant hand is to reach for your phone, you could feel it start to fidget. There's something happening in your brain that there might be there's 100 or 1 million things that you could check on your phone. You could look to your left or to your right or down at your phone, and there's 1 million other things that you could think about and excuses to get distracted. So I think those are some of the reasons why it's very hard and why it takes actual focus and intention and effort, almost like you were lifting something or exercising, trying to apply that same effort to truly and deeply listening and empathizing. So that's hard.
Yeah, I get it. And I remember this conversation the last time, Joe, about um, slowing the conversation down. How, you spoke a lot about your experience in the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
So
you've got it.
you were talking about how the meeting took a new turn.
Yes,
Tell us about that. It's better to hear it from you.
I
Yeah.
would love to. Thank you. And I want to quickly lay the context that by that point in my career, so there's a few leadership jobs in. It's maybe halfway through the 20 plus year journey that I described, a little more than halfway through. I already had a sense that as I got into more senior leadership positions, it's generally a troubling and unhelpful dynamic. I don't know if you found the same in your career. You're sitting in these leadership rooms and people are talking faster and faster and faster. At least at the companies where I would work, it clearly was it was a badge of pride. It was a way to show how smart you are, how fast your brain moves, how nimble perfect for startups and growth companies you would be, how prepared you are for that chapter and the next chapter, adding value. I really feel, I know not everyone has thought about it to this level. I really feel like all of these things are deeply intertwined. And there was not always a culture in these leadership rooms, even at the great companies. But interestingly, when you go to, let's say, a department level meeting, at least in customer support, we were all listening to each other. Get into these leadership rooms, everyone's interrupting each other. The first pause you have, in your sentence, even just shifting a comma in your sentence, you get interrupted by somebody else in the room. Everyone's talking over each other. And yeah, you're basically talking, as fast as you can. So the story that I told you, a few colleagues and I think there were four of us total, we were headed from the SeatGeek NYC headquarters, one gentleman joining from Florida, and off we fly over to the Philippines because we have a partner staffing team there who spoke to our customers every day. And so we're there to invest in the relationship and show our gratitude and optimize the support and so forth. Going over to work with that group in the Philippines, we owe them a huge debt of gratitude for many reasons. One of them being that not everyone thinks about this. Folks in that part of the world and many parts of the world, they are potentially working overnight hours every day to serve us and our customers better. So this was the case. So we joined the team for their local time overnight shift. So anyone who's experienced this, it takes a little adjusting, right? You land, and I remember waking up and boy, I was tired. I mean, it was time to go to sleep, but it was actually time to have dinner and go to the office. Everything was backwards. We were maybe a few days in, so much had happened already. My colleagues and I were just bursting with thoughts. We wanted to catch up and share our thoughts with each other and got off one of our overnight shifts. So maybe it's 9 or 10 a.m. Local time. We're very tired. We gather in the hotel lobby and we we all had so much to say at once. And so I'd like to think that I played a role. I think it was a collaborative effort. The four of us basically got very excited of real time agreeing on a structure of meeting that we wanted to have right there, sitting in the hotel lobby. And it was so simple but so powerful. We basically decided that each of us would take a turn introducing a topic, something from the day that we really wanted to unpack and discuss. One person introduces a topic. I think we had that person speak first, if I'm not mistaken, probably followed because they could explain why they found the topic worthwhile and share their thoughts. And that first person and each person to follow would have the ability to fully express their thoughts without fear of getting interrupted. And so they could sort of turn off this constant sort of stress and concern and fear that I find we all had getting interrupted. And so now there's no need to speak faster and faster or to just go ahead and end the thought with something different than you first set out to say because you don't want to get interrupted or you're worried that you're inconveniencing other people or not sounding smart enough. Take a deep breath, gather your thoughts. You could feel free to have pauses, reflections, redirect yourself, and basically each person would share their thoughts on that topic, and they would declare when they were done sharing their thoughts. I remember sort of we didn't do a round of applause at each turn. We probably just did a nice nod of acknowledgement, another deep breath, and the next person would begin. So I think we probably went around and had four topics with each one of us being able to weigh in on each of the four topics. Probably a 60 or 90-minute meeting, so a bit lengthy, but not dissimilar from many meetings that packed our calendars every day, back in New York City headquarters. And just going through that meeting that day, boy, it was a phenomenal meeting. We all taught each other so much. There were so many true insights shared. I think we got to know each other better as colleagues and humans. And I have kept up with everyone who was in that hotel lobby, and we've all agreed 5, 10 years later, we remember that meeting, how special and how impactful it was. And an interesting commentary on the world, the workplace, or maybe my improvement areas as a leader is that we all dedicated that morning, to take that meeting style back with us. This shall be the norm. This is the only way to have meetings from here forward. Didn't happen. It was the magic of that moment. Hopefully we carried it with us in small but meaningful ways.
Mm,
Hopefully.
What made the difference?
I have a deeply, deeply held belief that every person in a given room
Hmm,
has a different style, a different manner of thinking and speaking and expressing oneself,
hmm,
and that there's a tremendous amount of wisdom and value and insight and joy, I want to say, that's lost in this massive effort that occurs, especially in a workplace, to conform to one way of speaking and expressing oneself. The speed of talking, everybody jokes about corporate lingo and how it varies, from company to company. I'm a startup guy, so we have our own language. I've never worked in a truly big company, but I've had many experiences where that person joins from a big corporation. They're so excited about startup world, and then they tell us, "Oh, I have to get used to the new language and the new speed." So there's in any given company, in given stage of company, industry, starting from the CEO, et cetera, there's going to be like a code, accepted language, accepted way of speaking. And so what I've experienced a lot in my career, especially in senior leadership rooms, is I'm spending, no exaggeration, maybe 80 or 90% of my thoughts and energy in that space trying to figure out how I will conform to the sort of accepted default, language and speed of that setting, and including in cases where it's terribly unnatural for me. And so now I have maybe 10 or 20% of my mind share to take the actual substance, my own unique thoughts and hard-fought learnings and insights and opinions. That's supposedly what I'm getting paid to contribute. But I have 10 or 20% maybe of my mind share thinking about the actual substance of the meeting, the actual value I could deliver. Mostly, I'm thinking how to survive the meeting, not sound like an idiot, and speak fast enough. So I think what was so powerful about that setting is we shook free, we shook off those shackles, so to speak, to sound very dramatic. We were able to exhale, take a deep breath, and really focus with intention on our true thoughts and our learnings and what we had to contribute. And I think there was a sense of delighting in each other's differences. I speak a certain way. Um, I remember there was a gentleman there from Florida, kindest human being ever on the planet. He spoke a certain way. There's a guy who's now where he should be in California, coolest dude in the world. He spoke a certain, and we just celebrated it. We loved it. We celebrated sort of the differences in delivery and uniqueness. And then we all were able to actually tap into the true insights that we had and the true value that we had to deliver. So in closing, I think, I wish I had I wish I had the powers and the ability to shift this more like out in the world, the work world. I think so much value, so many just incredible unique insights are left on the table in most meetings and most days, out in most work cultures, because there's just so much darn energy going into how to conform and be perceived the right way.
just to hear of this as a day or a set of meetings that you had with this intention shifts something for me when I'm listening to you. It's as if it's an invitation to a new spacious world where one gets an
Mm,
opportunity to
mm,
a little bit more completely self-expressed. And
mm.
yeah,
That's
it
a beautiful way of putting it. And I think I've used the expression things like deep listening and empathy a lot in my career and life. But am I correct that you're the one who introduced the terminology of powerful listening? I
I,
think for me and
I've borrowed it. I'm sure there are people that I
sure,
connect with who are brilliant, and there must be one of those who have actually spoken about this. I've written about it,
it's
but
great.
so I do. I have been influenced by the thought definitely and inspired by it.
It's wonderful. And I don't know if I asked you before the recording if I'm allowed to ask you questions, but maybe I'll ask you just one. I mean, what
Of course.
Even if you borrowed it or you're furthering, I mean, what does powerful listening mean to you?
Uh, I recently wrote about power as an idea of
Mm,
not, in the traditional sense, we use power as impact, as influence, as making a difference out there.
mm,
But there is another definition of power, which is actually the felt power, which is a lot about
mm,
self-expression,
mm,
freedom to feel and speak from how I feel and what I feel.
mm,
Gee.
mm,
Yeah, Gabor Mate, this gentleman who's done a lot of work around trauma and emotional, injury that we
mm,
gather through life, particularly the first part or the initial life as a child. He speaks about how um, um, one of the core needs of a human being, even as a young person, is authenticity, which is the need to pay attention to how I'm feeling,
mm,
to know what I'm feeling,
mm,
and then to be able to speak exactly that or address exactly that through actions.
mm,
And when that somehow is one of those things which is lost under social influence or
mm,
schooling that we receive, not in a corporate on school setup, but even at home, from be better than what you're feeling right now. Don't talk
mm,
your feeling and control your temper, etc., etc.
mm, mm,
So there is room for, of course,
mm,
holding back of some emotions, but the connection itself is lost. That
mm, mm,
what am I feeling right now?
mm,
So power in that context is a little bit about what's going on in here for me,
mm,
and can I bring it out as out there,
mm,
expression of who I am more completely, more authentically? Can I be true to myself?
mm,
That's power. And listening in that context is
mm,
that can I, through listening,
mm.
intentional listening, purposeful listening, make a difference.
Yes.
It's stay in that context. What your meeting is so powerful because it made
Mm,
two participants,
mm,
not just about the gentleman who's listening. It's actually the meeting that changed.
yes.
People who are speaking change because you listen differently.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so beautifully articulated. So I'm really grateful to get to listen for a couple of minutes and learned a lot, honestly, doing that listening. So powerful experience and powerful listening is something I'd love, to take with me and think about and use that language. And what an interesting thing that it's so much, I mean, it's infinitely almost more widely accepted, in society that speaking should be so much more powerful than listening, but actually listening could be equally powerful. And I love it. It to me, a couple thoughts. One, it relates also to the idea of availing yourself to all the sounds around you. So it could be your colleague speaking to you, like the example that we talked about. It
Mhm.
could also be listening to the natural sounds around you. I think the movie is called Hoppers. I hope I get it right because I'm terrible with this stuff. But one of the joys of having young kids is I get to see kids' movies and that I would have never seen. And a recent movie, I think it was called Hoppers, was amazing. Took my son to see it, and I left, probably giddier than him. It was so powerful and so beautiful. And my favorite scene was the grandma with her granddaughter, and they're sitting on a rock, and the grandma was teaching the kid to really slow down and be quiet and listen. And it's cool when it's a movie and it's a cartoon, so you could just bring it to life and exaggerate this dynamic, but that's 100% true. So in the movie, once they started to listen, it was like limitless, creatures came out and they're all, calling and singing their songs. But I found it amazing that when I came back to normal life, and I love the town I live in, but you could call it a fairly average town, but we have trees and we have birds and critters. And I think even the same could be true in a city in its own way. And you just start to listen and the magic that unfolds. It's incredible. I have an aunt who's very wise too, Aunt Maxine, to shout her out. A similar enough concept, even though if it's a different sense, is looking around. Swivel your head a little bit. We're all just either looking straight ahead or now, I mean, my neck is terrible. We're looking ahead or down at our keyboard, at our phone, etc. What about looking up? And for all the city people listening, maybe you don't have as many critters, but maybe you could look up and she'll visit New York City and say, "Oh my God, look at the top of this building. It's gorgeous. I bet it was built, hundreds of years ago." And I'm like, what? Who does that? Who looks up in New York City? Well,
Yeah.
she does. Some people do. So listen, look to your left, look to your right, look up. Taking the world around you is just an amazing opportunity. And the other thought that I want to share is in some ways, so again, the joy of a setting like this and the comfort that you bring is I talk about, what I'm excited about in career in a different language than, it's say in a client meeting. I provide customer experience consulting impacting these metrics. Those things are true. But what I find even more fulfilling about this chapter, it's almost like an experiment in whether things like powerful listening and relationships and empathy could be my job. Could I like to use the word playing also playfully? Could, building an even broader community of amazing human beings and playing with them and listening and helping and so on and so forth. And also to some extent, I think about capital a lot too in life and in the workplace. Um, I am very humble about many things and know all the ways I'm an idiot or terrible at. I've been pretty good throughout my career with, treating people decently and dropping little favors here and there, little notes here and there, little seeds. And if I only had full-time normal jobs my whole career, that would have been great. I think it probably would have led to just continuing to do that my whole life. I still try to do that, but there is some dynamic now as a solopreneur. When you go from a direct deposit twice per month to no direct deposits or benefits anytime per month, it's a humbling and exciting and inspiring experience. And part of it now is going back and gingerly seeing, oh, do I have any capital, to cash in here? Hello, old friend, do you remember me? And it's just one of the most fulfilling and humbling experiences in my career, just to, not all the time, but often enough hear back from people. "Oh, of course, I remember you. And I remember the note that you sent me, 7 years ago on a random Thursday that made me feel valued and made me feel seen and heard. And the context could have been anything. I'm realizing how many friends I have from interviews that I either led or participated in, and nobody got the job out of it, but it turns out we made a friend because of the way that we treated each other in the experience. So it's pretty great. So it's, cashing in old favors and capital, returning the favors, building new capitals reciprocally in every direction, and just could this be a job? Could this be a source of income? Again, I think I'm very lucky that maybe my career experiences lend to a more positive answer on that. I don't want to assume it could be the case for everyone, but I do wonder if, for more people, this sort of almost, currency of kindness and listening and empathy and mutual help and utility, I wonder if it could drive more uh, uh, jobs and incomes and more of the economy and work world than we think, as foofy as I might sound right now.
This is uh, such an inspiration as a possibility
Mm,
um, to 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 hold on to and uh, to permit it to linger in the air, to let
mm,
it exist as a possibility and to
hmm
appreciate and how that resonates with the heart that this is what's coming to me to articulate basically what you're speaking of is a world in which we listen, we
mm,
we permit a more completer expression, and that generates vocations, that
mm,
self-generates businesses
hmm
and lives.
Yes.
Yeah, and it
Yes.
it aligns with perhaps the kind of stay that you were talking about in the Hawaii. And there are some places which have somehow seem to
Yes.
facilitate this way of being more and more completely. Yeah.
Yes, I loved that part of our last discussion, and I think you were mentioning places um, where I just haven't had the joy of going yet. India is one example, and there's so many others, and I haven't had the joy of going there yet. And we were talking about East, West.
Mm.
culture and civilization. And yes, then I offered this observation that in my life, one of my joys and privileges was first visiting Hawaii, as a lot of people do coming from the mainland. Again, not everyone's lucky enough to, but first we just, we saved up. It was a big trip. It was a week and a half or something. But then feeling something so deeply from that visit that my wife and I kind of conspired over the course of the next several years, culminating in moving there for a year. And when we moved there for a year, our kids were about 4 and shy of 1. So we did, it's all relative. People go on much bigger adventures than us, but we had a good number of friends and family who thought we were quote unquote, we were crazy. What were we doing? We 10-month-old on a 14-hour flight is not a joy in and of itself. My wife had to quit her job. I was working remote. We figured everything out, where to live and daycare and all of that. So just a kind of tangent to say, however big or small, I mean, for us, it's probably somewhere in the middle. But if you could find an opportunity to have a mini start over and figure things out and face challenges you don't day to day, try to lean towards taking it would be my advice. But what I shared on the first call too was this sense of it's the aloha culture. And I know for me, I grew up in the New York area and watched TV shows and movies. And honestly, before visiting Hawaii, I thought that aloha was something more, written on tourist t-shirts, or hats or things like that, or, it's what you'd greet the tourists with at the hotel, and those things might be true, but what gets missed and what I didn't realize at all is that it's actually a really deeply held culture and way of life in Hawaii. And it really, really all starts with care and kindness and respect. So respect for Mother Nature and the world that you're living in, understanding your, infinitely tiny place in the timeline of history. Um, Americans coming in, American interests and influences had to teach Hawaiians about the concept of home and land ownership. For them, it was completely foreign. They're just a guest, on that plot of lands. They're graced, they're, blessed with the privilege of borrowing that space or living in that house which is on this lands, which is nobody's and everybody's. It's the earth's. Um, and so even though in modern Hawaiian culture, there's home ownership and there's big condo developments and all these things. What's true to this day, you get to an intersection in Hawaii, your biggest problem is you might get stuck there for 5 minutes. Four-way intersection, everyone's at a all stop sign. In the Northeast, it's too uncommon. There could be frustration and road rage or accidents because you're trying to inch ahead of the next person. In Hawaii, believe it or not, it's not just a stereotype or an exaggeration or something from a movie. You might have four windows rolled down and everyone's giving each other the shaka sign and saying, you first, brah, you first, friend. I got nowhere to be. You're probably in a bigger rush than me. Everybody figures it out and smiles or a little honk, and you go on with your day. You take your kids to the playgrounds. I'd have my hands full. My wife would be working a shift at the hospital. She had a very fulfilling career experience there. Have my two young kids at the playground. There's two kids who want to slide down the slide with me. What am I going to do? Another adult, or in some cases, an 8-year-old child pops up out of nowhere. Hey, I'll take him, you take him. Off we go. It's this sense of ohana, of family, really permeates in day-to-day life and culture. So I found living there for a year to be incredibly, incredibly fulfilling. Um, I could say this on your podcast because I've told my mom this, so she knows that, I came home for her and I came home for my family and my friends. But this cliche expression of part of your heart stays somewhere,
Mm.
I felt the most myself and the most comfortable and at home and at peace in Hawaii than I felt in my whole life.
Mm. And you create a little bit of that in our listening today by yeah, you know sharing this itself is transformative. It does, and it's like an invitation to experience it and to carry a little bit of that with ourselves.
It's beautiful. Again, I really want to thank you and I really want to praise your deep powers of articulation. I mean, because you took me back to, these life chapters wind down and there's still emotion in it for me, as you could probably hear in my voice. And so there was this sort of promise or this commitment, at the end of the year of, could I take the aloha culture back home with me? If I tell your listeners, I live in New Jersey, I live in northern New Jersey, could you somehow take Hawaii and this aloha culture back to you to New Jersey and New York offices and our day-to-day grind, and one could beat up oneself, have I done it enough? So it's actually a very, very deep and profound compliment to pay. If there's a little bit of that aloha spirit in our recording today, or the self that I bring day to day, then that's actually a huge compliment. I thank you for it. And you definitely do the same in your own way.
Thanks, Joe. Joe, what does aloha literally mean?
Well, aloha, as I understand it, and I want to call out, there's much bigger experts than aloha than me. I'm just a student and a guest in Hawaii. But aloha is an interesting word because it could mean hello, goodbye. It could definitely just signal love and community. It could be, again, it could be hello and goodbye, but I guess I'd expand that to say that it could be a greeting and a salutation that carries deep meaning.
Yeah.
So that if you wish someone aloha at the end of an encounter, you're not just closing the conversation and saying goodbye. You're wishing that person aloha in the rest of their day. You're asking them to continue to spread aloha. You're just acknowledging sort of the beauty of the moment, the interaction. Let's go forth in aloha together is kind of what you're indicating, and it's beautiful.
Wow. And that's such a beautiful juncture to complete this. I remember hearing in a program that I was attending once that the power of the greeting is in the intention that you carry as your and that's how you beautifully articulated, Joe. Thanks so much.
That's wonderful. That's like many of your lessons I'm finding we could also, take with us. So the next person we greet, even if we're just saying, hello, how are you? How's your day? It's the intention. And probably we could, express our deep intention and care no matter what specific words we choose. So another pearl of wisdom. And thank you so much again for this conversation and having me today. And I hope we have lots more conversations in the future.
And that's Joe for you, always turning things around. So thank you. Thanks for being here, Joe. This is a truly generous conversation. Not just in the way that you thanked in the end, but about everything that you created for us, the experiences that you shared, the philosophy that you invited us into, of listening purposefully and for participating slowly and speaking more deliberately so that it does make a difference. Thank you so much. Thanks for participating.
Thank you too, and with intention. Again, it's been a privilege, and thank you.
And for everybody listening, aloha.
Aloha.